We've been talking all week, and we'll talk about it into next week as well. We got rough news up on Twitter about our buddy Dave Cokin, who's been battling cancer for about a year, and he sent out a message and saying, it's not going well right now. He got a lot of well wishes. The outpouring has been tremendous, and we wanted to bring people on who love Cokin, worked with him, know what a unique dude he is, what a good radio guy he is, what he's like in the gambling world, what he's like away from all of that. And John Hanson is one of those guys. John was the program director in the early 2000s. John did a show, afternoon drive show in this slot with DC, and we tracked John down, and parts unknown. All right, John, I don't even know where you are right now. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me on, and really it's a really huge honor. So many people, you mentioned the outpouring of support for Dave, and we all love him, and it's a real honor to be able to speak about him.
Well, before we get into Dave, I'm sure there are some listeners who are like, hey, that's right, John Hanson. Where are you now, and what are you doing? I know you had a long stay in Minneapolis. You did a lot of TV. I know you were the PD at, 61 Sports in KC, so how's everything going?
Everything's going good, man. Yeah, Kansas City was a lot of fun. Was in Minneapolis, and so still hanging out in the Midwest, and out of the business, though, Steve, so maybe I'm a little out of practice.
Do you miss it?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's great to have great friends all across the industry too to keep up with. So, and old Mitch Moss, I think we text quite a bit too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's set this up with the relationship and the show with Cokin by telling people, when did you first get to Vegas, and what was your hookup to get in with ESPN Las Vegas?
Yeah, I think I got there in 1999, and I think by the end of 2000, I was there at Lotus. And for me, it was just long story short, but it was, just kind of knocking on the door. And I had been over at another radio station doing a show with my friend Joe Hawk. And at one point, the opportunity just kind of presented itself to end up at ESPN Radio 920 at the time. And I think I was just trying to be a host, but ended up being in the PD spot. So that was quite a surprise to me, and probably a little bit early for me to be doing that, but I jumped at the opportunity, obviously, and was able to join that team.
And then when do you first meet Dave? Like, how aware were you of Dave Cokin?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I may have run into him a time or two prior to joining the station, but my first opportunity to get to know him was working there at the station, and it was pretty intimidating for me because we had such a good veteran crew at that time, and I was very young. Inexperienced, thought I knew what I was doing, and it was a challenge to try to get the support from people who have been doing it a lot longer than me. But as I think about Dave, I think about just how supportive he was of me and everything that we were trying to do. Some of the things that we tried to do were maybe a little bit different than what the station had done before or traditionally in the market. And he was a guy that back then that embraced it. I don't know if he was always comfortable with it. We asked him to do stuff maybe he wasn't used to, but I know he was always about what's best for the station. He always wanted us to be the best we could be. I know you can attest to that. And that's what I think about with Dave, is what a great team player he was and what a support he was to me when really I had no leg to stand on as far as, I was completely pretty much unproven, but he was still very, very supportive.
John, can you describe a little bit about radio back then versus now, like especially in Las Vegas? Because I hear all these stories. I've already been doing this for about 8 years now, but going back 20, 25 years, people always tell me all these crazy stories about what it's like. What were some of the differences? Was it more fiery off air than it is now? Because now it's kind of benign.
No, it's like back then. That all we talked about back then would have been the lines. It's kind of funny. So it come full circle, I think, a little bit, right? Because back then, all we talked about were the lines. And then I think when I came in, I was coming from markets where personality of the host was so much a factor in success or lack thereof.
Sure. So
we tried to probably bring a little bit more of that to the radio station in addition to just kind of the basic facts. And now here we see in this era how the lines have become so prominent, and everybody really calls it kind of the sports radio of the future. And not even the future, in many ways, it's the present right now.
John Hanson is with us, a longtime host and program director at ESPN Las Vegas. We've been talking all week about Dave Cokin, who he's still with us. We wanted to have conversations about Dave while he could hear all this, see all this, enjoy it. And, I have a bunch more people lined up next week who love Dave. It's funny when Greg said about where benign now our group has actually, and this speaks to Lotus Broadcasting and its loyalty. Our group has gotten old. Like, well, it's not a good
point.
Like,
that's a good point.
Like, in a way, I guess a good word would be we've matured. Like, we're not the lunatics that we were 15 years ago. But I want to go back to what you said about Dave, because you're right. When you came in and then I followed, there's a brand of sports talk radio that maybe Dave hadn't done, and you got him going on it. And it's funny, the more you do radio with Dave Cokin, you realize that he's got all of that to offer. Like, he's actually a little bit crazier than all of us in terms of life experience. So that was always a joy for me. I'd be like, what? Wait, hold on. And, you start to dig, and then he would get into it more. That's, to me, why I know people know him across the country as a gambling dude. Like, I think he's a really good radio guy. He's certainly an all-time Las Vegas radio guy. But how did you find it as the show grew? Were there some times where you're like, what, Dave? Really?
Yeah. Just what you're opening up right there, what's going through my mind as you're talking is going, man, we don't have enough time for all the different layers that he has and all the different ways that he was talented on the air. And what a great personality. I mean, we all love him, right? Like, so we know him, and we're lucky enough to say we know Dave personally, and we love all those aspects about him. And yeah, he had an interesting life. We were always amazed that he would be talking about how late he was up the night before, but then he's performing at a high level, right? And but I think about for the different facets of him. Yeah, we had him try some stuff. I'm thinking about but he was always able to do. He could do whatever he wanted him to do. Is what I'm saying. Like he was always able to be really, really professional. I think of a time where we once tried to fool him. We tried to trick him. We told the audience in the commercial break that the next segment was going to be an April Fool's joke, and he was out of the studio, so he wouldn't have heard that. And it was the day of the national championship game in college basketball, and I think Bobby Knight had moved on from Indiana, but I believe Indiana was in the national championship game or the Final Four. We were bringing on an analyst to analyze the game from the Final Four, and the guy all he would talk about was how great of a job Bobby Knight did this year. And Dave was like, you could see in his face he was puzzled, but he didn't want to embarrass anybody. He wasn't quite sure what's going on, so for that reason I don't think we fooled him. But at the same time, he was like trying to keep it professional and not embarrass anybody and not say anything like, you're full of it or anything like that. So it was just kind of an example of the way he was. But I think that, again, just kind of talking about how Dave is as a person is a great teammate. That really comes to mind for me. And you can attest to this, Steve. I mean, like I've always said, in my days, it's like, man, if you got a problem with drugs, we'll help you. Problem with booze, we'll help you. But if you're a bad teammate, man, like, we don't need you around. And Dave was the best teammate because he would be not only supportive of any ideas, he would provide a lot of ideas, and he was a huge help, mentor, as we've heard a lot about, I know this week especially, to everybody. And I'm talking about the interns that would come through. There was nobody kinder to those interns than Dave Cokin. He was absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, he was oftentimes as I look back on it, you talk about how the staff has matured. We had a lot of immature folks on that staff back then, and Dave was kind of the adult in the room.
Yes, he was. He's also, the reason he's a good sports talk host, and we're talking to John Hanson, who worked with Dave Cokin, and, Dave's still around. He's fighting the fight. Dave is a natural yacker, but he's also naturally combative and does not give an F. Like, if you say something he disagrees with, and as a young radio person, maybe you had sort of a nice relationship at times or with other people. Dave does not care. Dave will put you in a position where you're in the corner and you're like, I got to swing out of here or he's going to knock me out. I'm going to look like a clown.
Oh, I did. I looked like a clown many times. I mean, and, especially like, again, I'm going, why was I even on the radio talking about boxing? Same conversation with Dave Cokin. Yep. When I moved to Las Vegas, I knew nothing about boxing. And, of course, you have to know something about boxing if you're going to be on the air there. And trust me, I learned a lot from the likes of Dave Cokin and Kevin Iole and Al Bernstein. And so by the time I, had a few years in, I knew some things. But to be in a conversation with him, especially a debate with him, what was I doing? I should have just shut off the microphone and left the room.
It's so awesome.
Sometimes he talked enough where I probably could have done that. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah. He could carry you if he needed to. And the other thing for everyone who's worked with him, and especially in that era from like 2000 to 2012 or so. If you didn't have credibility around town, being out and doing a remote, you saw around Las Vegas, people were like, "Oh, they know this guy." Okay.
Yep. Yeah, being out and about, and certainly when it came to getting guests on the phone, getting guests to come to events. Again, just like I just look at myself, I'm like, why did I even do anything? I should have just, and I think in a lot of occasions I just did say, hey, Dave Cokin's part of this.
Right.
And people said, yeah, we'll sign up. I mean, he had just had such great connections. And the reason why he had connections, as you know, because this guy did it right? As a radio host, he did everything right. He was able to, as a radio host, critique folks, criticize it when needed. Probably more critique is probably the better word, because he never did it disrespectfully. Right. People always like coming on with Dave. So it was easy to get guests. And honestly, listening to Dave talk, like when you would talk about boxing, or of course he could talk about many, many other subjects with incredible knowledge, and to listen to some of the people that we were able to bring on and just Dave talking to them, they came on too because Dave would talk on the level of them, and they were professionals in their field, and it was pretty impressive. So yeah, I was very lucky to be standing by that.
Well, we'll close on this, John. I appreciate you coming on, because I know these are not easy things to talk about, and when you think about it, and you're a pretty humble guy, the tree that you kind of created there with broadcasters and producers and board ops, a lot of people are still at the station. A lot of people have moved on to bigger and better things. So, you know what? You did a hell of a job, and I'll also thank you, because I came in as a brokerage show. I don't think you knew who the hell I was in 2004, and you guys treated me like I was part of the station. I would come to the meetings. It wasn't like, what is he doing here? And I don't know if you saw, Tony Benici and Jesse Leeds went into the Southern Nevada Sports Hall of Fame for what they did with the LV Sports Network. And I told Tony, I was like, hey, the thing I really appreciate the most was that you gave us freedom to do what we did. Sometimes we'd cross the line. You didn't flip out. You didn't try to fire us. And you know what? Early on, John, you were part of that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, it just kind of brings me back to Dave. I'm going, when I started, some of my ideas were really, really crazy. And Dave was on my side from day one, even when I didn't deserve it. So I really appreciated that about him. And I'm telling Dave to keep the fight going, man. We absolutely love this guy, an absolute legend. And it is truly a great, great honor to be able to speak about Dave. And I love you, Dave.